Hello, I am Sophia, a 35-year-old woman, and I've been taking care of our home for 10 years now. My husband, Robert, is a doctor. We don't have kids, but we've been pretty happy, until one day, everything changed. Robert came home late, like usual, and dropped a bombshell. "I want a divorce," he said. "I'm marrying another woman." I was shocked. "What do you mean?" "We didn't marry for love," he added, and he was right. Our marriage was more of an arrangement. His parents wanted him to marry, and I guess I seemed like a good match. We barely knew each other before we tied the knot. The only thing we really had in common was our last name. Looking back, maybe I was drawn to the idea of sharing the same last name. So, we rushed into marriage, and for a while, we managed all right. I never thought we'd end up divorcing after 10 years. Even though our marriage wasn't built on love, we had been together for so long. But now, out of the blue, he wanted to marry someone else. "When did you start betraying me?" I asked. But Robert denied it. He said he met this nurse at the hospital about a year ago and was drawn to her charm. He claimed he was tired of living with someone as boring as me. I was shocked and hurt. "How can you say that after all these years?" I asked. But Robert was cold. He said living with me had been like hell and that he was done. I agreed to the divorce, even though it broke my heart. But then, Robert dropped another bombshell. He said we didn't even need to go through the legal process because he never officially registered our marriage. We were just living together, not legally married. I felt betrayed and angry. Robert had kept this secret from me all these years, and now he was using it to avoid giving me anything in the divorce. That day was supposed to be when he submitted our marriage registration. But instead, it was the day our marriage officially ended. I couldn't go because of an urgent matter, but it turns out he never submitted it. Not submitted. Are you joking? We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. It's impossible that you didn't submit it. Normally, yes. That's why I made that rule at the beginning. If you went to the office, everything would be ruined. When we got married, we made some rules. I, as a homemaker, would handle all the household chores. I was on an allowance, and part-time work was prohibited. Robert would handle all governmental and official matters. "Why would you do such a thing?" I asked. "Because I was about to be forced into a marriage with someone I didn't love. It's not like I was going to submit it easily. I was saving marriage for someone I was destined to be with." "Then you should have refused the marriage proposal in the first place." "I couldn't refuse. My parents are stubborn and wouldn't listen. What would have happened if I said I didn't want to marry? Plus, I wanted a housekeeper." "A housekeeper?" I asked in disbelief. "I'm a busy doctor and can't often tend to household chores. So, I decided to marry you as a housekeeper. It was a good deal for you too, right? You could eat well and have a roof over your head without working. You seemed desperate to get married too. What, were you probably feeling pressured because your friends were getting married, right?" Robert sneered. "Even though we weren't actually married, you were seen as the woman who married a doctor. This 10-year relationship was a win-win for both of us. That's all it was, and it ends today. You should be grateful for the good times you had. Now, you have to live on your own without relying on others." I was stunned. "I can't believe this." "Oh, and one more thing," Robert added with a smirk. "Don't tell my parents about this. If you do something unnecessary, you know what will happen to your father, right?" My heart skipped a beat. My father, who runs a medical equipment sales company, had a contract with the hospital where Robert worked. It was through my marriage to him that this connection was made. If I told my in-laws, Robert was implying he'd sever the contract as a threat. In other words, He was blackmailing me not to do anything unnecessary. It's your fault for being deceived. How pitiful to be thrown out with nothing, he laughed. But the one who would be thrown out without knowing anything was actually him. I couldn't help it, I burst into laughter. What's so funny all of a sudden? Robert asked, confused. I can't believe you became a doctor with that kind of knowledge, I said, chuckling. What do you mean? I knew all along about your mistress. And I knew you never submitted our marriage registration. That's impossible. That's why I've been preparing, waiting for the day you bring it up yourself. Preparing to get my revenge on you. In truth, I had suspected my husband's infidelity for the past 6 months. But without solid evidence, I couldn't confront him. So, I decided to hire a private investigator to look into the matter. Ma'am, there are 2 things I need to tell you, the investigator had said. The first is that your husband is indeed having an affair. We've gathered evidence of him entering a hotel with a nurse from his workplace. And the second, there's a possibility you two are not legally married. Not legally married. What does that mean? I had asked in shock. I overheard your husband and his mistress at a cafe. He said they didn't need to worry about alimony or property division since they never submitted a marriage registration. What? I can't believe it. We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. I don't know why he didn't submit the marriage registration, but that's why he never let you handle any official procedures, the investigator had explained. Yeah, that seems to be the case. I can't believe this. How could this happen? It's rare to hear about someone not submitting a marriage registration for 10 years, but it's not unheard of. This is too much. Am I just supposed to accept this? Not necessarily, the investigator said, a glimmer of hope in his voice. What do you mean? Let's make him pay for deceiving you for 10 years. First, we need to prepare without him noticing. And so, I began my preparation with the investigator, ready to punish my husband for everything he'd done to me. So what if you knew we were never married from the start? It doesn't matter what I do with other women. I don't need to take any responsibility, Robert said, trying to brush off his actions. You said I was pitiful for not knowing anything, but it seems you're the one who's pitiful. What do you mean? We're considered to be in a common-law relationship on paper. So what? He scoffed. You might not know, but you can actually claim alimony and divide property in a common-law relationship. What? His confidence wavered for the first time. He didn't know that not registering as a legal marriage could backfire on him. Yes, you can make claims in a common-law relationship. It's not well known, but it's possible. Of course, there are some conditions. Conditions? Robert asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. The common-law relationship is established based on 2 criteria. First, both parties must have the intent to marry. If it's just living together, that's cohabitation. Mutual intent to marry is key. That seems subjective and hard to judge, he said, trying to dismiss it. For instance, if you had a wedding ceremony or were recognized as a couple by others, it can be acknowledged. We've had a wedding ceremony, and our parents and friends know us as a couple, Robert muttered. Then the first criterion is met. The second is living as if married. This includes sharing a household for over 3 years. You and I have been living together as a couple for over 10 years. As a homemaker, I've obviously shared the household finances. This is recognized as a marital relationship. So that means. It means if I can provide proof of what we've discussed, I can claim alimony and divide the property, I said calmly. I'm not an expert, so I've already consulted a lawyer. After meeting with the lawyer, I was told I could claim alimony and property division from my husband. I informed Robert of this, watching as his face turned pale. The confidence that had been so strong moments ago drained away. But even if you can claim alimony and property division, you're just an unemployed woman. Do you plan to rely on your parents after being kicked out? He snapped. Didn't I say I was preparing? I've already found a job starting next month. I've also secured a new place to live. Don't worry about me, I replied, my voice calm but firm. He stared at me, speechless. You thought I, a clueless homemaker, would be helpless. But the tables have turned. I stood up and smiled coldly. And just so you know, I'll be discussing this with your parents. Do you not care what happens to your father? He threatened. If they break the contract, it'll ruin him. Let them, I said, unfazed. Sure, you were the link to the hospital, but the contract continued because of my father and his company's efforts. Whether or not they keep the contract is up to them. Let's see if the hospital will break a contract just because their doctor's 10-year marriage was a lie. Try telling them that. My father and I won't be affected if the contract is broken over this. In fact, it'll only show the depth of their trust. We'll just find another hospital to partner with, Robert said dismissively as I took out my phone. You're not calling your parents, are you? He asked, his voice suddenly panicked. That's exactly what I'm doing. Our parents think we're still married, so it's only natural to inform them if this relationship is ending. To my surprise, my husband's demeanor changed. He began to apologize. Please, let me talk to them. Don't call. Why? You know how strict my parents are. If they find out about this, I'm done, he pleaded. I stared at him, incredulous. What does that have to do with me? Huh? You're asking me not to tell the truth because your parents are strict. Are you kidding? You could have refused the marriage from the start if you didn't intend to marry. Now, after 10 years of a selfish marriage, you're afraid of your parents finding out. I can't accept such a convenient story. But I can accept your story, I continued coldly. I'll make sure to tell both your parents and mine. And so, I called both sets of parents. All four were shocked upon hearing the truth, and a meeting was promptly arranged at our house. When everyone had gathered, Robert's father was the first to speak. I've heard everything over the phone. Is it true that you pretended to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration? Speak up, you foolish son. It's true. I didn't submit it, Robert admitted, his voice low. Why would you do such a thing? Didn't you think about how Sophia would feel? His father demanded. I had no choice. No choice, you say. How can you even say that? It's actually your fault, Dad and Mom. I didn't want to get married, yet you started looking for a bride on your own, saying it was time I got married. You arranged meetings and tried to force a marriage on me. You're the one who agreed to the marriage, aren't you? His mother interjected. I had to agree. If I had refused, you would have made a fuss about it, so I decided to get married. If you were resolved to marry, why didn't you submit the marriage registration? His father pressed. I read about a man on the internet who was in the same situation, Robert began defensively. He didn't want to marry but had to because of his parents. He lived a married life without submitting the registration and then revealed the truth when he found someone he truly loved. That's appalling. And what happened to that man in the end? His father asked, disgusted. He's now married to the person he loves and has a real marriage. So, I too will marry my girlfriend and have a real marriage, Robert said confidently. At that moment, my parents, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. My father's voice was filled with anger and disappointment. A real marriage, huh? Sure, you might not have had a love marriage. But do you remember what you said at the wedding? We will never forget to care for each other and build a home full of smiles. What did those words mean to you? What were we shown that day? He paused, his eyes narrowing at Robert. We sent our daughter to you, hoping for her happiness, but you deceived her for 10 years by not submitting the marriage registration. Did you build a home full of smiles? Now you're leaving her for another woman. Can someone who acts without a shred of care, even if they change partners, truly have a real marriage? Robert stammered, well, that's... My father cut him off. I was happy you married our daughter, not just because you were a doctor. I thought she could build a happy home with someone as sincere as you, my father began, his voice heavy with disappointment. But it seems we were mistaken, deceived, even. And you threatened our daughter. If she told us the truth, you said you'd cut off the contract with our company. Seriously? Robert shifted uncomfortably, but my father's voice grew sharper. If you're going to threaten our daughter, we'll cut off the contract ourselves. Be warned. And we'll tell the truth when asked why. Robert's face paled. If you do that, there will be rumors at the hospital, he stammered, panicking. Rumors? Well, yes, my father replied coldly. But that's the result of your actions. You were the one who threatened us with cutting off the contract. My husband was in complete panic now, his voice trembling. Please, wait. This is getting out of hand. Let's just talk. Don't mess with us, my father-in-law bellowed, grabbing Robert by the collar, his face flushed with rage. We didn't raise you to be such a scoundrel. What were you thinking? Father, please stop. Robert pleaded, his voice desperate. By not submitting the marriage registration, you might have thought you were doing yourself a favor, his father continued, his voice thunderous. But because of your selfish actions, Sophia was strung along for 10 years. What were you thinking, causing such trouble for others? The living room fell silent. Robert, faced with his father's fury, had nothing more to say. His usual arrogance was nowhere to be found. Sophia, and to your parents, my father-in-law began, his tone softening, I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by this idiot. No, you parents shouldn't apologize, my father responded. It's not your fault. However, Robert's father sighed, it's partly our responsibility as parents for letting him act this way. For now, we'll take him home and make sure he doesn't continue this reckless behavior. We'll deal with the aftermath properly. We're very sorry for all this. With that, Robert was taken away by his parents, back to his childhood home. You've been through a lot, my father said softly, turning to me. For now, you should come back home and rest. We'll think about what to do next later. You don't need to worry about anything right now. My parents looked at me with such kindness, their concern evident. Thank you, I said, smiling softly. But I won't go back home just yet. I still have things I need to do. I declined their offer and stayed in my own home. What I had to do was prepare for the final settlement with my now ex-husband, gathering evidence for our common law relationship and preparing to claim alimony and divide our assets. A few weeks later, a meeting with a lawyer was arranged. Robert, still defiant, couldn't hold back his frustration. Even if I agree to alimony, why should I divide my property, he spat. She's been a homemaker for 10 years, never working a day. All the furniture, clothes, food, I paid for everything. And now you're telling me I have to hand over the money. I worked hard for her. He ranted, unable to accept that his money would be shared with me. Yes, that's correct. The money you earned and the furniture are subject to property division. Why does it have to be like that? Who did the housework while you were working? Who cooked meals with the groceries you bought? That's irrelevant now. No, it's very relevant. A homemaker is entitled to property division because housework and childcare have economic value. Speaking as a human, not just a lawyer, do you think housework is something anyone can do? that it's just expected of a homemaker. The reason you could live freely is because of her support. Don't get that wrong. What? This situation is a result of your actions, yet you have the audacity to be selfish. What did you say? Never mind. Anyway, she's entitled to half of the assets for property division. That's how it is. Years is just a short time, but it's longer than you realize. During that time, she devoted herself to you, believing you were a married couple. You have no right to complain after betraying her. A perfect rebuttal. He couldn't say anything and reluctantly agreed to my demands. Then I also sent a notice of claim for alimony to his mistress. I knew who and where she was, thanks to the investigator. As he had said, she was a nurse working at the same hospital. The mistress, having heard from him that there was no possibility of alimony or property division, must have been utterly shocked by the contents of the claim. Wait a minute. This isn't what you told me. What do you want? I told you not to talk to me at the hospital. I got this from your wife. You said there wouldn't be any alimony because we weren't married. What's this all about? I later learned that in a panic, after being served with the alimony claim from me, she confronted him at the hospital with the notice I had sent. Okay, let's talk about this later. Not here. There are too many people around. We'll both be in trouble if this turns into a rumor. I don't care about that. I can't pay this kind of alimony. You said it was okay, so you should pay it for me. What? I won't pay a penny. You were the one who wanted this relationship. You said I was the only one for you, that you wanted to marry me. Hey, quiet down. Everyone can hear us. Just so you know, I'm not in the wrong here. If you want to make amends with your wife, do it yourself. Tell her I don't owe her a penny, that you'll take care of everything. Wait, hold on. Hey. This exchange led to the revelation of their affair to the entire hospital. It quickly became the talk of the place. And then, the final blow came with my father's request to the hospital. I apologize, but we would like to terminate our contract at the end of next month, he said. The hospital, already aware of the rumors, hesitantly asked my father, "Excuse me for asking, but is the reason for canceling the contract related to Dr. Roberts' affair?" It's already become a rumor. Yes, a nurse presumed to be involved caused quite a scene. I never imagined this would happen, my father admitted. He had been pretending to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. I never expected it to turn out like this. You mean he never submitted the marriage registration? They asked, shocked. Weren't you aware? All we knew was that while being married, he had an affair, my father explained. What do you mean he didn't submit the marriage registration? With my father's request, it was revealed that Dr. Robert had been deceiving me for 10 years by not submitting the marriage registration. This news quickly spread among the other nurses. Dr. Robert deceived his wife for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration, and he had an affair with a nurse. How low can you go? How could he do that? They whispered. Can someone really not notice for 10 years? Apparently, Sophia's maiden name was the same, and he managed all the official paperwork. That's scary, another nurse added. The rumors didn't just stay within the hospital staff. They spread to the patients, and soon both Robert and his mistress were receiving cold stares. Unable to endure the shame, they both resigned from the hospital. As my father later told me, "Did you manage to get the alimony?" Yes, I received payments from both him and his mistress. She refused to pay until the end, claiming she was deceived, but the lawyer made it clear her argument wouldn't hold, and she reluctantly agreed to pay. That's good. What about the contract? Was it cancelled after all? He asked. No, that's off the table. He resigned, and since our company is trusted, the hospital asked us not to cancel the contract. We couldn't cancel it after they asked like that. That's a relief. After that, I started a new life in a new place and was living happily. About a year and a half later, my ex-husband contacted me. "Is it true you got remarried?" he asked. I had indeed married a man I met at work, and somehow, he had found out. "I wonder whose number this is," I said, puzzled. "Going through the trouble of changing your number just to contact me. Just answer my question. Yes or no?" "Did you get married?" he demanded. "Yes, I got married," I replied calmly. "You betrayed me," he spat. "Betray? We were never legally married, so I didn't think it would matter to you, right?" I responded. "That's a different matter," he fumed. "Indeed, things are different now. We're completely separated, so my marriage has nothing to do with you." "Is that why you contacted me?" I asked. After I said this, he seemed at a loss for words. Then he taunted, "Of course, you're still unmarried, since you probably haven't submitted a marriage registration. You're that kind of woman." But things weren't as he imagined. "Unfortunately for you, my husband isn't the kind of person to do such terrible things. He knows all about your story, so to ensure I wouldn't feel anxious, we went to the office together to submit the registration. Sadly for you, things aren't as you thought." I could hear his frustration, but I added, "I can somewhat understand your wish for me to be unhappy, considering your own misery, but sorry, we're happily married." With that, I hung up the phone. What kind of life he leads now, I don't know. But unless he changes his selfish nature, it's unlikely he'll ever find happiness.